Good morning. Thank you for being with us this morning. Welcome to this new French Cluster webinar edition. Today's topic, an update on US immigration. So whether you are currently in the US, in Europe, waiting to know when you will be able to come back, we will try to cover most of your concerns today. We will talk about the famous national interest exception that might be applicable to some of you, as well as a few updates on H1B L1 J1. My name is Alain Charbonnier, and I'm the co-founder of the French Cluster. So just a quick reminder of our mission before we start. We are a group of French experts based in Los Angeles, and we help French-speaking people in California to reach their business goals. We offer mentoring opportunities, an extensive network, and a deep knowledge of the different ecosystems of our beautiful region. So we are happy to see you connecting from both US and Europe. And today we are glad to have two great panelists with us that many of you know already. Lorraine D'Alessio, the founder of D'Alessio Law Group, and Stéphanie RAININ, Director of Immigration Services and French Cluster expert. You can ask the question in the Q&A chat box, and we will try to answer them after the presentation. So join me in welcoming Stéphanie.
Thank you, Alain, and good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Lorraine D'Alessio. She's the CEO and founder of D'Alessio Law Group and is a leader in international immigration. As a 2017 LA Business Journal Leader in Law and a 2018 Enterprising Women Award winner, Lorraine has worked with countless industry-leading companies, organizations, institutions, universities, artists, and innovators from around the world. D'Alessio Law Group has helped clients from across the international corporate, tech, and entertainment ecosystems reach new professional and personal heights in the US and beyond, while providing top service within immigration, business transaction, intellectual property, and entertainment law. Our approach is tailored to fit the unique goals of each client, as well as the challenges standing in their way of success. Good morning, Lorraine.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you.
So I wanted to start this webinar asking you, a lot has changed in the US in immigration since March. And I was wondering if you could give us a brief overview of the current situation.
Yes, absolutely. So as we may know, as U.S. embassies and consular posts, routine visa services there were suspended as of March 20th. But then there has been slow reopenings that have happened since then. USCIS, the actual service centers within the United States, continue to process visas, renewals, extensions. So those functions are actually moving and operating. A lot of people, there's a myth that a lot of people think that they are stopped, and that's actually not true. The consulates were closed for quite some time, however, have slowly all reopened. The entry of non-immigrants who are present in China, Iran, Schengen area, the UK, Ireland, and Brazil during the last 14-day before entering the U.S. have indeed been suspended in entering the United States, and there is an exception that can be applied for, which we will be speaking about in more detail. But this is the national interest exemption, and we're seeing that even for consulates that are not of these particular countries, we're noticing that there are variations of extra scrutiny that is happening at the consulate as people are looking to enter the United States and get their visa stamps and their passport to come in and enter. So you shouldn't sort of assume that travel will be smooth through any consulate that is outside of these areas, you should definitely be speaking with an attorney about your travel and about what the experience is at that consulate as well. So just a heads up on that as well. The US, Mexico, and US Canadian borders remain closed, particularly US Canadian, to non-essential travel. Now we had seen this until November 21st, and that had been continually extended. So it was supposed to be for a short period and then kept extending. So if you are not for example, a Canadian a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen, travel going into Canada or holding a work permit into Canada, travel is restricted for you if you are not of those groups. So definitely, really do not go to Mexico or Canada to quarantine if you are a non-immigrant. And if you are intending or thinking about traveling through Canada or Mexico into the United States, you really want to be speaking to an immigration professional about that travel before you go and make that commitment, especially financially in terms of booking flights, etc. Now, if you are seeking to come through Schengen area, Iran, China, UK, Ireland, and go through, for example, Mexico, stay 14 days in Mexico and then into the US after that, I would again be speaking with an immigration professional on that myself. We would be happy to help you. There have been many challenges that we have noticed with people's travel through. So you should be booking some time to speak about what those challenges have been and whether you may experience what you may experience for your own.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I wanted to ask you, despite the current situation that you just described, Europeans like me are still able to travel back to Europe and come back in the US in a certain capacity. Could you elaborate on the circumstances that allow some of us to do that?
Certainly. So because you are holding, for those Europeans that have actually dual passports, so you have a U.S. citizenship as well as citizenship for your European, perhaps Schengen country, you are indeed exempt from the 14-day suspension coming back into the United States if you are indeed coming in to visit your home country or your family or what have you that you're doing. So you do not have to be concerned or worried that you wouldn't be able to get in with that exception. Now, this could change, but right now this is the case. So if you do not have the U.S. Citizenship, though, however, then again, you want to be speaking with ourselves to help you on your travel. There are certain communications that can be made to the U.S. Embassy to allow for your, your travel into the U.S. And there are certain communications that should be made, but we'll do that on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you one more thing as well. Given the latest stay on restrictions, can you explain who can currently apply for an H1B, H2B, L1, and J1?
Okay, yes, really good question. So President Trump announced a proclamation on April 23rd, temporarily blocking the issuance of green cards to foreign nationals outside of the US, but included several exceptions. And he also renewed until 2021 calendar year on through a new proclamation on June 22nd, with the additional visa classifications adding restrictions to H1B, H2B, L1, and J1. So that would mean that anyone that had been a beneficiary of the H1B lottery that was outside of the United States seeking to enter the US would not be able to do so until December, the end of December 2020. However, and this also included L1s and J1s. Now, we had a federal judge ruled a preliminary injunction against that proclamation on October 1st, ruling that the president does not possess the power of a monarch to cast aside immigration laws passed by Congress, which helped a great deal. So this lifted these restrictions on H1B L1 and J1s, and so now those cases are in fact allowed to move. If you are in that bracket, you definitely would want to be speaking with ourselves or an immigration professional. Now, I want to also just generally say that H1B and H1B is for degreed professionals that are coming into the United States to do a job that would require a university degree to do that job. J1s, you're looking at vocational training, you're looking at often those that are in sort of trainee positions or a job that would be taken on in between studies. So you can be certainly exploring eligibility on this to see what works and what doesn't work. So definitely, speaking with, again, an immigration professional to help guide you through would be highly recommended. USCIS announced also additional expansion of premium processing as well. So there was a time where premium processing on these applications was on really all non-immigrant visa processing was suspended, but now it is back in place. However, at a much higher fee increase. So that's important to keep in mind for yourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our participants have asked a few questions, so I would like to bring them up here. So we have a family, so here it is. As a family on L1B and L2 visas, they need to apply for an extension. They're currently living in the US. They have travel booked to Ireland, their home country, and appointments in the US Embassy for L visa extension. If we travel to Ireland and get our visa extension, will we be allowed back in the US?
So now they are allowing the movement of L1. So on its face, yes, there is permissions to move ahead with an application like this, especially with the pre-approval. Now, there will have to be there will have to be a interview that's done and a stamp that's done in the passport at the consulate level. And that is what it requires the communication ahead of time based on national interest exemption to really look at whether that interview would be a green lit. And then the date can be set in place for the family to go, the principal L1 visa holder to go have the interview with the consular official and be given permissions to go ahead and have the stamp put in and then enter. So it's not simply a fill out of the DS-160 application. Ireland is one of the countries that has been affected still by this proclamation on the 14 days. So that extra step will have to be done. Now, however, looking at the L1 is indeed a go ahead on that side. Yeah. So, but again, these are very case specific question, this particular one. So, so we will have to, we should be speaking with, if you don't have an immigration practitioner that's helping you through this, I would highly recommend, that you do be speaking with one. We'd be happy to help.
I have a question now. This is a family with an E2 principal and several E2 dependents with an EAD card. They're looking to go home, back to France for the holidays. Are they able to do so?
Right. So, yes, if planned well. I'd want to be looking at the date of issuance of the E2, if it was processed within the U.S., if it was processed from outside the U.S. and the stamp. There's a number of follow-up questions actually to answering this particular question. And that is because there are more restrictions on the number of months that are issued for E2s for French nationals. So we have to see how long you actually have on the E2 to allow for your re-entry into the US. Earlier this year, we saw a tightening up, unfortunately, of the time that is allowed for E2 for French nationals. So now, the travel back into the US as a non-immigrant visa holder, because E2 is a non-immigrant visa is subject to the 14-day restrictions suspension. So we'll have to carefully look at either an NIE application or potentially looking at another country to be quarantining in before entering the US. So again, certainly a conversation you want to have with the immigration practitioner. We're really happy to help. Thank goodness that the E2s and the consulates are open in terms of the businesses moving forward on this side though, and as many E2 visa holders were held back with the consulates being closed. So.
Lorraine, can you what we commonly call an NIE, what the national interest exception? Can you, all of us hear about it and a lot of us are not sure what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help define this. It's meant to be used in basically limited cases beyond those contemplated by other exemptions. It's really in place to assist in allowing for travel into the US that is recognized and approved by the federal government as being travel that is affecting the national and economic functioning in the US. So what we are looking at particularly is what the job is, what the functions are that this particular principle is coming into the United States to do in terms of its impact for American jobs, in terms of the amount of foregone opportunities economically that may happen if this particular principle does not come into the US. Looking at so basically it's exempting this particular principle from the proclamation and the sort of barring and suspension of foreign nationals of these nations because of the economic importance of what this particular candidate and the work that they're doing coming into the United States is having. And I'm putting this into layman terms. There's more legal technical language that I could use to describe what an NIE is, but I want to sort of dumb it down for you to that basic. So the numbers are very, very important in these applications, and they have to be really, really strong, good numbers to put forward in our experience in order to win these cases. We find that it definitely all cases are not getting approved straight across the board. We're finding that the service is definitely being quite selective about which NIEs they will approve and which ones they will not. I have seen the officers being extremely compassionate in some situations, and then I've seen the officers, be extremely difficult. So what you're putting forward, the evidence that you're putting forward, the arguments that are being written is quite vital to getting approved.
Okay. I need to ask you one more question. Coming from Boston. I need my L1 visa, being told to travel to home country to do so and not apply in the US. I'm traveling home with my family and have an American embassy appointment, but I'm afraid I won't be able to get back into the US. Can I travel? So that's along the same line.
I'm so sorry, the audio was a little bit, I didn't hear the whole. If you wouldn't mind repeating, my apologies.
I need to extend my L1 visa, being travel to home country to do so and not apply in the US. Traveling home with family, I have an US embassy appointment, but I'm afraid that I won't be able to get back into the United States. Can I travel?
Okay. Right. So you can, you certainly can travel. I would, again, I'm not looking at all your documents, but generally speaking, for L1 visa holders that are requiring extensions on its face without knowing all the factors here, you can. Now, coming back into the US, you're suspected, right? This is what has to be done very carefully. And if it's coming through France, we have to, again, with this national interest exception applies, and we would have to make the appeal and the argument to the consulate to say that you should be exempt from the proclamation and could come straight through without having to quarantine. So also that you could then proceed with the consular, with the actual appointment too for the stamp in your passport, because when you're going to be getting an extension onto your L1, you can't just go straight ahead. You would have to, once the extension is approved internally from the service centers, you will then have to get an additional stamp in your passport at the consulate before entering. So that NIE is what happens prior to being able to go to the consulate. So it's, you don't have to be afraid. You just have to be carefully guided by an immigration practitioner, and it's a step-by-step process. So there is a way, it is possible to do this. There are a number of steps that has to be made to be successful. Okay.
Stéphanie, do you have some further questions?
No, I think this is it on my side for questions from the audience.
Okay, I'm checking if I still have a few questions open. Please do not hesitate to use the Q&A box.
I think we had a question coming in.
Yes, I see that.
So Jerome is wondering whether he can attend trade shows in the US.
So, you certainly can. There is we'd have to look at whether you have ESTA already. If you're using ESTA, it is not an issue to use ESTA in terms of whether if you already have the ESTA stamp. And if you already have ESTA and you're not seeking to extend it, we are noticing from people that there is that you can use it. Okay, so if you have to go on and reapply for it, then we are noticing problems happening there. So if you already have it, you can be using it, because to attend trade shows is like a business visitor, or and the ESTA includes tourist-like activities, plus also business visiting activities. Now, you could also be it coming into the US to through the consulate and applying for a B1 application, which a B1 is for a business visitor, and if granted business visitor status for a 6-month period, actually, you can also use that to come in and attend the trade show as well. Now, it depends what your current status is, what you have, in terms of an ESTA or B1. Now, the 14-day restriction proclamation still applies here. So you would, if you were going to be, moving forward with this, you would have to quarantine through a non-Schengen country. And I would suggest after the 14 days, then purchase your ticket into the US. Otherwise, you put at risk actually canceling your ESTA visa waiver. So this is something that you've definitely got to keep in mind.
Thank you. We have another question. Someone is wondering whether you can travel and come and go between France and the US on a B1, B2 visa for business meetings.
Yes, again, you can do this, but the travel back and forth is not something direct that you can do. So you'll have to be looking at that quarantining in a non-Schengen country. And as I recommended, you got to be very careful about the purchasing of when you're purchasing your flights to enter the US. Some have been attempting to go through Croatia, and we've been noticing some difficulties with that because there are non-direct flights back into the US through Croatia. So just be wary of that. And I would just take every case by case. I would be doing the investment of talking to an immigration practitioner about any travel into the US right now, even if you're on a B1, B2, because I'm sure there are going to be factors that are distinct to you, distinct to your situation that we need to go over. And so we want to, check on that, look at that before we, give our final recommendations on your particular case.
Excellent. I'm wondering also if you could touch up briefly on the immigrant visas, the EB1s, and whether there are currently any changes.
So the EB1, if you qualify for EB1, so this is a green card route for those of you who are not aware. Extraordinary Ability EB1 is the fastest way right now to come into the United States outside of a marriage-based application for green card. It is actually been current this month. So what that means is that once the first portion of the application is done, the bona fide test to assess extraordinary ability, or to test, the qualifications of the candidate from a from a preference category standpoint, then we're looking at the wait times that would apply for the actual adjustment or the actual assessment of any grounds of inadmissibility and medical clearance into the US, also including dependents. That portion there, which tends to be obviously the second portion, sometimes attorneys will try to file at the same time as the I-140. So the first portion, which is assessing criteria and eligibility. However, if you break it up, that portion is definitely subject to potential retrogression, so backlogs. And right now for EB1, extraordinary ability, based on your distinction or based on, in terms of your career and what you've accomplished in terms of your work has caused you to be competitive and stand out in your field. That second portion has been quite retrogressed, but now is current, so it can be applied. So we are seeing EB1 applications processing in even about 1 year's time, which is good timing for that. And the first portion, which is the I-140, can be premium processed right now, and you can have the response even within 2 weeks, which is quite quick. I think it is a good idea for people that are on non-immigrant visas right now to be speaking with immigration practitioners like myself to assess your qualifications for green card. Definitely if it checks out on the tax side too, that would be a good idea. Getting on firmer footing right now for the US in terms of status, I think is a very wise choice. We have seen obviously fluctuations in how the US government can change and the direction of non-immigrant visas right now. So like L1s, we've seen it, H1Bs, and so if you do in fact qualify for a green card, I think it is a good idea to be looking at that, weighing the options there, and hopefully moving forward. So the EB1, in terms of changes, the changes we have seen have been backlog versus non-backlog. And right now there is no backlog. I'm also seeing a great deal of compassion from the officers in approving these cases. And our approval rates have been extremely high, actually, which goes with a lot of hard work into these applications. So we are really encouraged to see that. Now, getting follow-up questions on green card cases is not abnormal, so you shouldn't be shocked if you see that. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, that indeed. You may get follow-up questions. It's all about how to tackle those, win those, and get you over the line. And we help you every step of the way on that.
Thank you. I think maybe I'll do one more question. Someone is asking if it is now possible to apply for an H1B, and if not now, when is the best time to apply for an H1B?
So the H1B, you want to start working on it now, actually. So the start date for filing is April 1st. October, November, this is when you want to start putting together your transcripts, your resumes, start identifying. The attorney would be working with you to identify the job titling, the description, the stated compensation, and really putting together the elements of that case for a winning application. Now, of course, it is a lottery system, but you want to go in as tight as possible. So if you get selected, then it'll be a smooth sailing for the rest of the way. So right now is when you would want to start that process, and so I wouldn't wait. And if I might add, actually, I talked about EB1A, which is the Extraordinary Ability route, EB1's route. There are also other EBs as well, EB2, EB3, based on someone's whether degrees, master's degree, bachelor's degree. So there are other routes as well that are not dependent on one's own individual achievement within a field, but actually on the employer's sponsorship of you. So if you have been employed and it could be looked at for the employer to step in and begin that sponsorship process for you, again, this might be a really good time to do that and get a little bit on firmer footing.
Thank you, Lorraine. I have a couple questions on my side. First question about an update for the TN visas for our Canadian friends.
Of course. So TNs are alive and well. They are being processed all across the US-Canadian border. However, certain ports you would want to be are preferable, I think, than going to others. We want to be looking at, of course, the eligibility of the candidate, the strength of the application, but TNs are processing just fine. For those that may be J Treaty eligible, so for those who may have First Nation blood First Nation status for Canada, the process is now done no longer at the border, but actually internally in the US through the service center. Emergency appointments can be done as well, but that is all done inside the US. Back to the TN for a minute. This is a great route for those degree professionals that are coming in to do a job that would typically require a university degree to do it. What tends to we see a lot of is economists, lawyers, people in accounting, also management consultants and graphic designers we see a fair bit. And if you do qualify under one of the occupations that's listed under the North American Free Trade Agreement, this is great because you're exempt from the quotas and the restrictions on H1B, which only allows you to apply April 1st. And there's such a limited number that are available, 65,000 for degree professionals, an extra 20,000 for those with masters. So for TNs, it's wide open in terms of the numbers that can come through. However, we have to assess eligibility, of course, and if all goes well on that, then we can carefully guide you through the interview that would occur directly at the border. Now, an extension can also be done inside the US, but we want to be quite careful about that extension inside the US and all the circumstances. They tend to put more scrutiny when you do that extension or application from inside the US. So we'd want to look at the merits of it, the supporting documentation that we have, and make sure that it's going to be really strong to get that approval. We are a little bit of perfectionists at our firm, and I think that's why we have a pretty high approval rate.
Thank you, Lorraine. And the last question that I had in my list was to make sure there was somebody that asked a question about a E2 visa that that he got in January 2019, so previous to any restriction, a French national, and he's asking for a trip to France and return. Is there any restriction that applies to the return? And also, could a national interest exception be invoked to be able to do the way back without quarantine?
So if I understand correctly, so he has an E2 currently and is looking to travel outside the US and then travel back into the US, and is wondering what the steps are. Now, so to start off with, we have to look at how much time is remaining on your E2. And as I mentioned before, there are now restrictions on the length of time for E2s for French nationals. So we want to double check this. And then we would absolutely, if you have been in France for the last 14 days or any Schengen country, even with an E2 visa, you still have to move forward with the NIE application. To really allow for smooth travel into the US. Now, some very creative attorneys, on the ball, may notice that you have that stamp in the passport and then try to make an appeal directly to the port of entry. So, for example, LAX, to say, please clear boarding for this particular candidate coming into the US. Now, we want to caution you that LAX has been extremely difficult in terms of bringing people through with the clearance on boarding. So that case better be ironclad, and what you're doing in the US better have great numbers attached to it in terms of foregone opportunities economically for the US and for your business, and also the kind of job creation that we could comment on, etc. So now we're finding that the NIE applications tend to be much smooth in approval at the consular level. So we definitely want to be planning ahead and doing that at the consular level, as opposed to just looking to LAX or the port of entry to be bringing you through. So I hope that helps to answer your question. But at the very base, what we need to see is is your stamp and the visa itself, so we can then inform on next steps.
Thank you very much. I think it was a lot of questions around those topics, both from E2s and from L1 visas that are similar in that respect. So yeah, okay. I think we have answered most of the questions. I want to thank Lorraine and Stéphanie very much for their time this morning, and we hope we were able to cover most of the questions that you had. You will find in the slides the way to contact us directly for your specific case, and we'll be in touch. For those that are traveling to France, a quick reminder about an information that you may have missed recently. A new regulation relative to the COVID test accepted has opened to the LAMP test in addition to the regular PCR. So you can find the precise information on the French consulate website, obviously. Besides immigration, let us know also if you would be interested in a webinar on the international travel conditions, recent experiences, tips and tricks, and so on, so that that could be a useful addition to the immigration topics, especially with the year-ends travel in mind. Coming next, we have soon a new episode of the French Cluster Education Program Digital First, and on November 12th, a webinar on the residential real estate situation. Again, thank you, Lorraine and Stéphanie, for your insight this morning. To all, thank you for attending this webinar that will be posted soon on YouTube channel. Stay in touch and see you soon.
Thank you. Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Ciao.